From the Cubby Hole at 2 Lindencrest Drive in Danbury, Connecticut, we welcome you to the Pante Show for today, October the 27th, 1986. Welcome Danbury, Bethel, and Richfield for another hour of hopeful learning and insight and understanding of this crazy spinning rock we call the Earth. We welcome Facebook Live. And folks watching on Facebook Live can go to obviously Danbury Channel 23, and you can type in anything you want. You can type in an insult, an hello, or a question for our guest, and we'll be operating that way for the next hour. Our guest tonight is one of the great pioneers of public access television. We talk a lot about Al Brun, who started this at teleprompter cable in 1979. And there are many people that have done public access shows, but none have done them for as long or as well as my guest. So without further ado, the Pante Show welcomes 25-year veteran of talk show productions, Kevin Gallagher. Welcome, Kev.
Hey, how you doing, Chris? Good to see you. And just one correction. I know that there's other producers on 23 that have actually been on the air a little longer than me. I know Lynn Waller's been on a little longer than I have. But yeah, 25 years back on October the 10th, we went on the air in 1996. And I never actually thought I'd be on the air this long. So less hair, more gray, glasses, but hey, same guy.
You know, a lot of people ask me, and I'm sure they've asked you the same question, what prompted you, Pante, what prompted you to want to get in front of a camera? And I have my little story, but since people have heard that. But back there in the 90s, what kind of pushed you to try to get a show going at Comcast? Was the person close to you say, hey, you would be good at it, or something that you always wanted to do?
Actually, I had grown up in radio, and for those people here in the local Danbury area that follow like WLAD, my dad was Vinnie James, and he passed away back in 7-8 years ago, but in 2014. But he was a staple on WLAD for years. I mean, like 30 years. And he did the Vinnie James Bargain Express. He did the morning show there for a long time. So I have the radio bug. I have the broadcasting bug. I can't help it. So what happens is I was always looking into doing radio, and I kind of fell into doing TV kind of by accident, believe it or not. What happened was I was for a couple of years following a series of scandals that had gone on in the NFL, and I was trying to contact various outlets, and nobody wanted to pick up the various stories. And at that time, there was a guy, Big T. He had a show, and I was calling in to give some updates on some of the information I was finding, because I could start to get some of the information out. And I was grateful that I was able to do that. One day, he called me up after the show, and we talked, and I wound up coming onto his show, and this must have been around 1995. And I was on the show, and I was thinking it was going to be, one shot, Chris. So I tried to get out as much information as I could. And after the program, he said, why don't you come back and do the last Friday of the month with us? So I did that for about a year and a half. I did the last Friday of the month. So this was like 94, 95. So the show that I did started in 96. And probably about 6 months, 6 times going into that, I told myself, I can do this. I know I can. And it took me about 6 months, Chris, to kind of put the format together. I was thinking about all different kinds of crazy things that I could do. And this format that you see right here, where I am, black background, empty, very simple, very, very plain. I had gotten the idea from watching like the Charlie Rose show. Um, it works. It always has. And I couldn't come up with a name for the show. And there was a guy by the name of Cliff Randy in an office that I worked in Bethel at the time. And he walked by me with a rolled up newspaper and swatted me across the shoulder. And he said, "Why don't you call it Time Out with Kevin Gallagher?" And I didn't laugh, Chris. I go, I started thinking about it. I go, that's actually pretty good. Because I like getting a double entendre on the words, multiple meanings. And it did all that. So timeout, you take in sports, you give a little kid a timeout when they're bad. You take a timeout to say, let's sort all this stuff out. And I loved it. And I've used it ever since. So that's how the title of the show came about. It took me, like I said, about 6 months of peeling it around in my head, came up with the format, the round table, and nobody really was using any kind of a black background or a round table at the time. So I brought in my own round table. And at the time, Mike Duff, who co-hosted about 100 shows starting off, we used to put up this black wallpaper on the walls, this black paper to get the black background. Now over at Comcast, there's like a runner with a black curtain and a yellow curtain. So now you just take you like 5 seconds, you just run the curtain. It used to take me like 45 minutes to hang all the black paper up. Then I have to take it back down. It was it's a big pain. And so that's how we went about doing that. So I originated the black background roundtable format there at Comcast. And you'll never look back. It was a lot of fun to do.
It's interesting because one of the great joys, and you do have powers, and not only are you the host, but you're the producer, and producers control the content. As you look back over your 25 years, being able to talk about the things that you want to talk about in any way that you've wanted to present them, that must have been maybe, I don't know, I would guess maybe the most fulfilling part of your career. Talk about that.
Well, my basic idea behind it, Chris, and a lot of people who know me will tell you, I try to do a program that you would want, that I would want to watch. And I'd watch an interview program or watch something like that. And I'd say to myself, why aren't they asking the questions that I want asked? Why I want to find out about this, but they're not asking this. They're asking all these other silly things. So I would always try to ask the questions that I think the viewer would want asked and try to really find out, more about the person that I'm talking to. And hopefully I've succeeded at that. That's always been my approach. The other thing is, when you look at people who host TV shows, especially talk shows, the best person I can ever think of that did that was Johnny Carson. Johnny Carson, I tell this all the time because it really is true. And Johnny Carson was the best for a reason. Johnny Carson could interview Elvis or some super famous person would come on the show and he'd play second fiddle. Now, who wouldn't want to play second fiddle all day long to a guy like Elvis? I mean, they'd line up for city blocks.
Right.
But then he was known for bringing in the 103-year-old woman from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and he would play just as much second fiddle to her as he did to Elvis. And that's what made him special. He wasn't the show. It wasn't about him. It was the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, but he really focused on the guest. And that's something that I've always tried to do. And really, the name of the show has my name in it, really as a guarantee to the viewer that the show is going to be as good as my name. And I put my name on this, and I want people to know that I'm going to do everything that I can to put out a quality product, something that I would want to watch myself, and that somebody is going to get a lot out of, hopefully, and try to cover those things that aren't necessarily covered on Access, and try to bring even a local taste or flair to something that may be national or international in scope.
He's Gallagher on Pante. Has there, if you look back the 25 years, was there one particular subject or one particular guest that when you look back on the night spent still gives you a tremendous amount of satisfaction? One topic that just went through the roof for you one topic that you got the most feedback on? What are some of the highlights and the bullet points that you can remember? And as you're still making memories today, during the first 25 years?
It's interesting. A lot of the shows that I got a lot of response from was from the former race car drivers at the Danbury Fair Race Arena. Those
Right.
shows I would get a lot. I would get a lot of response to. People on the street would stop me and say, "Hey, you just had fill in the blank on," and some of those guys are passed on now. And what's really great is that's been capsulized in a time capsule that you can go out and look at on the web. You can go to YouTube. I have like 25 years worth of shows on. You can go to timeoutyoutube.com and they're all there, almost all of them. And you can go and do a search in the channel and you can find, all this different subject matter. And also, I never wanted to just cover like a certain topic or issue, but to really spread it out, because I didn't want somebody to think, well, I'll put the Gallagher show on now, but I know he's going to be talking about this, and I don't really want to hear about this. So one week it could be a musician, it could be a politician, it could be some kind of artist. It could be a current event driven thing. It could be something with technology. It could be just about anything that I feel that I could sit down at the time. The show's an hour now, but at the time it was a half hour that I could, do a good solid half hour with and present something that would be of value to the viewer.
Before we jump on off the past, I want to go into some of the things that you want to discuss moving forward. You've spent the last 25 years, brother, doing a lot of work, having a lot of shows on local politics. And next Tuesday, we have a mayor event in Danbury between Roberto Alves and Dean Esposito. Just from a viewpoint of someone who lives kind of on the outskirts of Danbury, let's say now, but you're very tuned in. How do you size up that race, and how do you think it's going to come out? And what do you think, as far as Danburyans, our needs are moving forward?
Well, what I can tell you is that it's the Republicans' race to lose. The Boughton was there for 20 years, and he basically could be elected for life if he chose to stay in that position. It's the Republicans' race to lose, and for right, wrong, or indifferent, that's how I see it. And the good thing, though, when you have an open seat race like this, you don't have an incumbent. What that means in an election is that when you have an incumbent, say Mark Boughton was still in office and we'd be having another election, it's really a referendum on the job that he or she did. That's when you have an incumbent. But when you have an open seat, what's really kind of cool about that is I've always called it the town or the city's conversation with itself. It's a time in which the parties can get together, discuss issues that are important to that town or city, and then you, the voter, can go out and air your voice about who had the better conversation, and to put those people into office that you feel are going to best serve the needs of your town or city. Ideally, and I know it's a bit idealistic, ideally that's really how it should work. But then again, we have politics involved, and kind of crazy, screwy things can happen, as we all know.
Well, it just appears to me that these local things are really all about how to spend the dollar. But Danbury has always prided themselves as being able to invite businesses, and people can thrive here. Do you still think that is an issue? Do you think that there's more, we can experience more growth? And how do you view that?
More growth is always possible. It's just a matter of how the people that you have in office, how they handle that job, Chris. It's keeping the taxes down, keeping the taxes low, making for a better business environment is going to encourage businesses, number one, to spend money, to invest in themselves, to invest in the infrastructure that they have for their businesses, which means that, number one, they're going to have to hire people. And so that brings jobs. The biggest misnomer that I come across in politics that I've seen since I was a kid, and I'm 57 now, is that you look at the government job figures and you hear about politicians on both sides of the aisle talking about how they are going to go out and create jobs. Government doesn't create jobs. Businesses do. What government can do is make the conditions favorable so that a business can actually go out and grow and do the things they need to do so that they can actually create the jobs. Unfortunately, people have forgotten that basic tenet, that basic principle. It's not government that creates the jobs. It's the businesses that do when they have the correct environment to be able to do so.
It was interesting you mentioned your dad, who went by the surname of Vinnie James, and
Yeah.
when he started doing radio, voice transmission was essentially him speaking into a mic and you turning on a radio,
Yeah.
and we got to hear Vinnie James, and we got to hear all the great other DJs from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. But the focus of today's interview is something that you really want to talk about is the development of the voice transmission. And we don't necessarily need radio anymore to turn it on to hear today's Vinnie James or today's Pante or today's Gallagher. And it's under this big umbrella of smart technology. Now, folks, just so you know, you were looking at the CEO of a great young radio network called the Truth Be Told Radio Network. Kevin Gallagher has put in his heart and soul, and it's a network that's 3 years old. And we're going to get into the stats soon of how much it's grown. But through that production or that development of this network, he's developed an interest like, okay, how can my network be heard on other than a computer and or an iPhone? And in doing that research, you came up with hundreds of different ways that technology can transmit voice. So let's go through it step by step and talk about what you've developed, this network that you developed, and the technology which is helping you bring it to the masses.
Well, it's an interesting technology, and what we're looking at is the AI technology. Now, a lot of people will use a colloquialism that they'll just say something like, Alexa, and it kind of encompasses everything. But there's Alexa, there is a number of different, what we also call voice assistants. You have Alexa, you have the Google Assistant, you have Siri, you have Hound, which you'll find in a lot of cars. That's another one. You have Bixby, which is developed by Samsung. But your big three that everybody knows about is Alexa, the Google Assistant, and Siri. And so when you look at voice assistants and you look at the AI, you're looking at right now, Chris, it's a mind blower. It's over 5 billion smart devices are on planet Earth right now. They're active in over 80 countries. So when you think about this, most people are thinking, well, wait a minute, you take a smart speaker like this little, Alexa Dot. I'm not talking about just these. I'm not talking about that. Your Google iPhone, your Google Android phone has, for example, the Google Android phone has the Android Assistant built into it. So every single one of those is not only a smartphone, but it's also a smart speaker. It has the same exact technology built into it. Now, when I learned that, it blew my mind. It just blew me away. Now, your iPhone has the Siri Assistant built into it. This is the same assistant that's built into the HomePod smart speakers. There's absolutely no difference between the two. So, on the other hand, you have right here, I have this muted right now, but this is the Alexa Dot. This is, it's ubiquitous. You see them everywhere. Everybody talks about them. And this is what I'm talking about. When people think of a smart speaker, they think of this, or they're going to think of something like this, which is the Google equivalent right here. This is the Google equivalent, and this is there. Now, this has the Google AI, the Google Assistant built into it. So you would say, okay, Google, or hey, Google, and this little guy, the lights will light up and ask for your answers, get your questions and give you the answer you're looking for. This has the Alexa built into it. Now, the Alexa is, in that case, that's the AI. The what we call, the Alexa, the speaker itself is the speaker. Okay, so that's a good rundown right there, Chris, that we could jump off from.
So essentially, when it comes to, and there's always a little bit of a struggle, what's practical and what's private. When we were listening to radio when we were kids, okay, I mean, maybe they knew who was listening to what, but when you interact with the AI, people are concerned about privacy matters.
Yes.
But it's practical in a sense that look how small it is. You could take it anywhere you want, right? Right. You could take it anywhere you want and say, Google, play the Truth Be Told radio network, and it pops on. It doesn't get simpler than that. Talk about the struggle that we have, though, with technology and trying to remain private and human at the same time.
Well, unfortunately, Chris, that's not a battle that I think privacy is, as we get deeper down the road. I think the cost of a lot of this technology is going to be some measure of our privacy. And right now that's the case, because as you alluded to, these little guys here, they're always on, they're always listening. So right now I have these muted. Okay, there's a little button on this one I can hit right here, and then you'll see it turn off, and now it's listening. It's waiting for me to say the magic word, which is Alexa. In the case of Google, it's waiting for me to say, hey, Google, or okay, Google. And that's the balance that we have to really try to figure out. The problem that I have with a lot of this is that when you hear people talk about these things, you'll hear it from a very negative point of view. And everything's negative with it. And I don't see it that way. I see it more balanced. Yes, they are listening. But then again, if you have an Android phone or you're walking around with an iPhone, they're always listening. They are a smart speaker, and they are always listening to everything that's going on. So, and the crazy thing is that on the one hand, people don't condemn the phone for listening to them. They're not even aware of it. I never made the mental connection about the phone always listening because it has the assistant built into it. It never clicked. When it did, it changed things. But these guys are kind of called a redheaded stepchild of smart technology because everybody says, well, they're always they're always listening. But I'm going to show you, if you have one of these and you want to limit that, what you would do to keep this from listening to you is right here. I have it muted, or even better, you see that? You just unplug it. If it has no power, it can't work. And that's like if you have instances, I hear like people have them in their offices on their desk, and what they do is they just unplug the thing when they have a more sensitive conversation that they want to have that has to do with business or something like that. There is even large companies, Chris. Last year I was reading reports where they were saying, hey, when you have business meetings, unplug the thing because we don't know who's listening. And the same thing is true where you have built-in webcams into a laptop, and people were putting tape over the camera because then again, you didn't know who was watching. You use the same precautions like you would with anything else. And that's basically use your common sense.
On the flip side of it, and this goes back to, you want your network to have the greatest amount of exposure possible. And the flip side of this, it doesn't get any better when you could essentially, people can walk around with these things and the voice can transmit. In other words, if I'm in China and I say, put on the Truth Be Told radio network, or if I'm in Italy or whatever the situation is, it responds to that. Am I wrong, Kev? Like it knows no boundaries, correct?
Absolutely true. Absolutely. Because we get listeners, we're averaging probably 6 to 10 countries a day. We're averaging 30 to 35 countries a week. So on a given day, and it also depends on the time of day, because if I wake up early in the morning, 7 a.m., I go and I look, I'll see England, I'll see France, I'll see Germany. They're 6, 7 hours ahead of us. So there's middle of the afternoon there. So, but I'll see Australia, I'll see New Zealand, I'll see those countries. And yeah, all you have to do is, and with all the lockdown stuff that we went through with COVID, these things got really popular because people were home with nothing to do, and you could just call up a song, play any song you want through TuneIn Radio. These things, both of them, and the Apple one, you can just call up a radio station, practically any radio station you could think of, and you're listening to your station right over the smart speaker in crystal clear audio, like it's FM radio or something. You're not getting the scratchiness of listening to it on shortwave, or if the AM radio isn't coming in well, you're in a bad location, you got bad weather, none of that matters.
So now we know that the power of voice through digital technology, you can be anywhere at any time and hear anything. When you decided, because I think that this always goes hand in hand, Kev, your baby is this wonderful network. You want the most exposure for this wonderful network, and you haven't hidden your head in the sand about what's out there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So from your research, as we work through this developing, it's every day is something new with the radio network. Do most people, are they still listening on a computer, iPhone, or are a lot of the people listening through a smart speaker? Is there a way of deciphering percentage-wise how the voice is getting to the ears?
Well, when I look at the stats that I have, when I look on the back end for the radio network, I can see a lot of it's coming through with Android, which I know is going to be a smartphone. So people are listening that way. I also know that when it says Android, these things, okay, they're based in Linux. So, for example, the operating system that run these, they took from Linux, because Linux is open source. There's no copyright on them. So, Google went and took Linux and reworked it into making it into the Android operating system for the phone. So Linux is the most used operating system in the world. It runs your mainframes, it runs your supercomputers, it runs smart speakers, it runs your phone, it runs your microwave oven, your coffee maker. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. The other thing is that they could modify this so that it could be used, and they don't have to worry about, all the legal stuff. It's an open source program, and it makes it actually in a lot of ways more secure. You have the same thing true with Apple, but Apple's proprietary to their system. But like you were saying, anybody in the world that has one of these, and they're very popular right now in certain areas of the world. For example, India was one of the first countries that opened up for Amazon. And if you go on YouTube and you look at stuff about particularly the Amazon one, and the Google one is catching up, you'll see a lot of videos produced from India about this technology, and it's pretty fascinating.
Do you think, and I'm just going to throw this out there because this just jumped into my feeble mind, do you think that the rise in this kind of technology is based on mistrust of the signals that people get every day? Like they turn on their TV and there's been mistrust of, because this is all about what? Information. When you really get down to it, is about to ask a question and hopefully get the truth. Do you think the rise and the use of the dots and the Android has anything to do with our anger at mass media and what is probably the easiest to get to?
It's not even so much that. I think it makes it easy. It makes it really easy, Chris. I mean, all I have to do, for example, just here in the greater Danbury area, if I say, Alexa, play WLAD, and
hey, it's Dave Vernelli, host of
and you're Dave Vernelli talking, and
so glad
there it is. Alexa.
Right.
Okay, so that's how easy it is to listen to a station. And we're talking not just some local station. We're talking if you wanted to hear a station in Kansas City or in a part of Canada, and you know the call letters, you can look it up, and then you can call this up, and it'll play it. And I've done that just to experiment. I mean, you can do crazy things like, Alexa, what's the weather in New Delhi, India? Okay.
In New Delhi, India, it's 62 degrees Fahrenheit with clear skies. Today, you can look for hazy sunshine, with a high of 81 degrees and a low of 61 degrees.
There you go. So, I
Makes me
mean,
want to go to Delhi, India, quite frankly.
yeah. So you have all kinds of information at your fingertips. You
How
can
much
ask
does
for
that cost? How much does that
these.
cost?
These you wait for them to go on sale. These are like $50, and then you don't want to spend $50 on them. Either one of them. They you want to wait until they go on sale. I've seen these as low as $19 on sale during Christmas time. So
I don't have one. I got to get one.
Yeah,
I got to get one of those things.
We'll talk. I'll get you one.
You know what's interesting? So you're saying that it's just a normal power source. Do you have to plug it into a computer, or is it just you're just plugging it into energy? Correct. It has all the information you carry with it.
You're just plugging it into the wall. So that's all you're doing. There's a cord. There's a cord right here. You know, if I unplug it, you know, there it is. There's the cord. You just plug it in. Now these have another jack where you can, with the hard wire, send it out to another bigger speaker or even a stereo system. So at one time, kind of on a haha, I had it hooked up directly to the inputs of our home stereo system in the living room, and you would hear her talking through our big giant stereo speakers and delivering the audio. So it's just another way of getting information and getting like music entertainment. But the thing is that they're just scratching the surface of what these things can do. The other thing that these can do, and they have a whole what they call the smart ecosystem, is it will turn your lights on and off. If you have the hardware, there's smart locks. It'll lock your doors. It'll do all kinds of stuff. You can set up reminders so you don't forget somebody's birthday or things like that. And they're just scratching the surface now of what these can do. We're, as I like to say, we're at the 78 RPM of the technology. We're nowhere near even getting to the long play record. This is in its infancy, and what it can do now is pretty mind blowing.
He's Gallagher on Pante. It's 5:33. You know, Kev, one thing you and we've worked on a lot of projects over the last, let's say, half dozen years. We enjoy politics. We enjoy observing fraud like we did last November.
Yeah.
But sometimes current events is to me, like I do a daily. So to me, it's important that I know what's going on in the world. And there was an incident, speaking of entertainment, and what I would call a real tragedy. It was a situation with Alec Baldwin on the set of Rust, and Helmia Hutchins died, where a gun went off, and there's some people out there who feel like he should be criminally prosecuted. I don't know how that can possibly be, but thinking about entertainment and responsibility, when you heard that news story, okay, how did you process it in your mind in terms of culpability? And if you had to present it, what do you think is going to happen, not only to Alec Baldwin, but on the future of the sets of some of these movies that tend to be rather violent, where evidently live firearms are used?
Well, it was news to me that they're using live firearms on a Hollywood set. I, for the life of me, can't figure out why you would use live firearms for anything on a Hollywood set. And Westerns, if you think about it, Westerns are kind of interesting because you look at them having gunplay in the movie, and usually they're far away from each other. There's somebody shooting from a window, or they're hiding behind something and they're shooting somebody in a distance. They're shooting at someone. And even when they were facing off, they were 30, 40 feet away from each other. So when they would do the fake rounds, in my mind, it's escaping me the word. I should know what it is. But what happens is they're too far away. There is stuff that comes out of the gun when they do the fake stuff, but you have to be so many feet away. Now, from what I understand, this was during a rehearsal, and he was given the wrong gun and told that it was quote cold. But I don't know what that means. I haven't been on a Hollywood set, and it just makes me wonder how something like that would get there when, number one, you don't need to have any kind of live ammo. The word I was looking for was blanks. Mm-hmm. You don't need to have live ammo. You don't need that to shoot a movie like that. What in the name of God is there any kind of live ammo being done in a Hollywood movie? That's what I can't figure out.
Right. And because everything today is, well, we got to bring it to the courts. I think of the term wrongful death. In other words, there's a husband and there's a child. And I could see, and Alec Baldwin, I mean, he couldn't be more destroyed over this. Okay. And he has reached out to the family. But if the husband decided to sue the production company in a wrongful death situation, I'm just wondering if that would get any traction in the courts, if they could actually, because it just seems like a terrible tragedy to me. It's just like these wrestlers, Kev, that have died during WWE shows when they're doing a gimmick with fire and somehow they catch on fire and they die. It just, I don't know if this is going to be a precedent situation where, you could criminally charge an actor for this. How do you see this being settled moving forward?
If it happens, if it happened the way that we were told, let me put it this way. I don't know if Alec Baldwin would get charged because he wasn't the one that loaded the gun or was responsible for the gun. That was given to him by someone else, the prop master, and it was their responsibility. And again, I have to go back to the fact that I can't figure out what they were doing with live ammunition in a Hollywood production when blanks, as far as I know, would more than do the job. And especially when he's rehearsing a scene, is from what I understand, he was rehearsing a scene, and I guess these two people were lined up one behind the other. So when he shot, the bullet went through, through two people, not one. So I don't know. I mean, it just, something doesn't add up in my mind.
Your worldview, this goes back to the 25 years that you have done a show, Kevin, and we talked about this on the radio. I'm sure the topics, if you were to look back, and let's say your first year, and the topics that you handled, knowing what was going on in the world versus the topics that we deal with now, how do you think your worldview has changed, having to pay attention to the culture as closely as you do?
Well,
that's a good one, right?
I'm usually a couple of steps ahead. Huh?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I'm usually, it is. I'm thinking because, the thing is I have to laugh because a lot of times I'm a few steps ahead of everyone else because I'm looking at all these different issues. And so the same people that would say you're nuts later are saying, hey, I agree with you. And I've seen that happen more times than I can count.
And you just mentioned the key word, nuts.
Yeah.
What used to be considered nuts essentially is because you had the first idea on a subject and you just thought about it with more of criminal intent or trying to destroy people. And I think that's the hardest thing for people to figure out, Kev. They think that when we bring up this side of life that we're trying to be killjoys. No, this is how the culture works. It's a death culture. And at least on public access and at least on your network, we are free to talk about the death culture. But initially, when we bring things up, they think that there's something wrong with us. Has that occurred to you during the many years that you have spent behind a microphone?
All the time, all the time. I can't count how many times that's happened. Yeah, like what I can tell you is right now, for example, you have a space war going on. And what do I mean by that? Well, you have Jeff Bezos over here and you have Elon Musk over here, And these two guys are right now vying for the control of space. I mean, Jeff Bezos, a couple months ago, came out with a statement that he wanted to control all of the shipments between the Earth and the moon. He wanted to be the guy that did that. They're already planning that far ahead to when you have mail service between the Earth and the moon. This is not Kevin Gallagher talking. This is Jeff Bezos talking, the guy who founded Amazon. So, you have that. You have Amazon that's putting up 3,236 satellites over 5 phases. When they get to 578, I think it's 578 satellites, that's when they're going to start their internet service. And this is going to take something like this out of your home and either put it as a wearable or put it as something in your car, and it gets Amazon out of the house. And that's like the next step in the game. And we're talking about high-speed internet. We know about SpaceX, and Jeff Bezos was trying to call foul because NASA didn't want to. They didn't want to use Jeff Bezos's programs, his systems to launch stuff. And you have to ask yourself, well, wait a minute. SpaceX is run by Elon Musk. Elon Musk has successfully, not just once, but a number of times, gotten people to the space station and back using his own systems, his own equipment. Jeff Bezos so far has just put Bill Shatner into orbit.
Right.
Who am I going to go? If I'm NASA, who am I going with? Am I going with the guy that put Captain Kirk into orbit, or am I going with the guy who's actually brought payloads back and forth to Earth, from the Earth to the space station and back? It's kind of an easy decision to make, don't you think? And this is where everything is. This is where it's all headed, because you have right now, Chris, you have astronomers and things, they're all earthbound looking up into space, and you have over 3,200 satellites in what they call LEO, that's low Earth orbit. And these are in a mesh around the Earth, so you can have internet access anywhere in the world, even the most remote areas. and Bezos is doing that. That's Project Kuiper. And then you have Elon Musk, who is doing it with his program, and he's a little bit ahead of him. So, it's going to be very interesting to see how this all shakes out, because this is going to be very significant. It's going to change people's lives on this planet as we know it, once it's all been instituted. And it's something that people I really do think you need to pay more attention to. It's something that's going to really change things and change the way we live on this planet, like I said. And just, go in and do a search and look for Project Kuiper, look up SpaceX, look up Jeff Bezos, look up Elon Musk's name, and you'll find a lot of stuff there. Project Kuiper, just look for it. There's tons of information that comes out every day.
We're expanding our limits. We're trying to get to the moon, as you just said, but we can't get cargo ships into ports.
Yeah.
Well,
that's when they're intentionally being blocked, but
Yeah. One of the great ironies of our time, and I thought about what Lindsey Williams, who you and I both know very well, when he worked on the pipeline, the Alaska pipeline, and in the mid-'70s, they said, well, what would happen if we just stop producing oil and tell the world that there's a shortage? And they watch us wait for 2 hours. And I'm just trying to make a hop of what we're seeing now. We're talking about Musk. We're talking about Bezos. We're talking about smartphones on Mars and Jupiter and the moon. But why can't we get cargo ships?
Why can't we get cargo delivered?
Why are they talking about the most expensive Thanksgiving of all time? There's two worlds that are going on here, Kev. There's the world of tomorrow, but when it comes to necessities, we're back in the 1200s. We might as well get this stuff delivered on horseback. Do you see the irony of what we're talking about in terms of technology, but we can't execute normal everyday things for the population? Talk about that.
Well, I can also take a look at the fact that we have right now a drug, that, and I'm not going to say it starts with an I, but we have something that works against right now, something that has caused lockdowns. All right. I don't want to get you thrown off of Facebook, because we live in a world, of course, right now that the technology companies run, and using the format that we're doing right now, going out on to the social media that we're going out to right now. We have to deal with the censorship. We have to deal with the political correctness, which is another form of just saying the word censorship. Political correctness doesn't sound so bad, but Americans and a lot of people really recoil at the word censorship. We know what that is and we don't like it. So, but the problem is that they can block something perfectly good that's going to help people, but yet the fentanyl flows across the borders. The heroin flows across the borders like no tomorrow, like nobody's doing anything about it. So on the one hand, something that's perfectly legal, that won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2015 for human use, it's not a horse drug, for human use, that was invented 50 years ago. Yet, we can't mention that without getting thrown off the air. And heroin flows into the streets, fentanyl flows into the streets, is killing people by the thousands and thousands every single year. I don't know of anybody, and personally, that hasn't been affected by this crap. And yet this is what we live with, and it's horrible. So yeah, I get it.
It's interesting. I almost think like we're victims of the wow factor. Like we're so amazed of where we're going. But our everyday life, I don't know. Do you like, if you're in California, do you want to spend $8 on a gallon of gas? And we haven't even gotten winter yet here. And so, yeah, it's nice that we have all these ways to make life more convenient. But there are some changes up there that are dramatically changing our everyday life, Kevin. And it's I'm me for one. I'm just kind of waiting for the world to change. That's how I've taken it. And how do you view all the things that are going on in the world? Does there seem to be balance to it, or are we distracted by it?
What you have to understand, and I'm not just talking to you, Chris, I'm talking to everybody that's watching, is that what people call the New World Order, what they call this stuff, it's actually a business plan. That's what it is. It's a business plan. And what they've decided is they don't want people traveling. They want them home. They want people to be as close to home as possible, to be managed. You can go to the Georgia Guidestones. You can look up words like population reduction. And that's the direction that things are going in. When you go back to the 1800s and you had the Great Expansion, they needed people. Now they don't need people. They're bringing in robots. They're bringing in driverless cars. They're bringing in McDonald's and other restaurants like that, fast food places, where a human is maybe taking your order and all the food is being prepared without ever being touched by a human hand. So when you hear people talking about getting their $30, $40 an hour, well, there's a catch. You see, you're not going to have a McDonald's with 50 employees. You're going to have a McDonald's with maybe 2 or 3 employees making $40 an hour because they don't need the people. They got robots. And eventually this will all be phased in. And we're at just the beginning of it right now, Chris. We're at just the tip of the iceberg. And that's where things are headed.
I was at Texas Roadhouse on Sunday night, and this is a good segue. Bro, I'm at Texas Roadhouse with my friend and his son. And I wasn't there when they ordered the food. The waitress came over and said, okay, you want a steak? And she writes it all down. Well, when they called for the check, she pointed to this digital device that's on every booth. And it gives you the bill digitally. And you put in your card. And so what tip? It's like, and I said to her, I said, you realize you're a waitress. And pretty soon they're going to figure out how we could get our order into the kitchen without you having to write it down, and she can't get around that. She goes, you're right. She goes, pretty soon we're going to type in, I want a steak medium well, and then you put in your card and you're done. There's going to be no wait staff anymore.
Well, I can give you the same story. We were at the Golden Arches, my wife and I, and we were in the restaurant, and they said, oh, no, go over to the kiosk. So I have one of the employees, a woman standing there showing us how to use the kiosk to make our order without ordering from a human being. And I turned to her and I say, doesn't this feel kind of strange to you that you're showing us how to use the very equipment that's going to replace you?
Right. And this is
How does that make you feel? You know, it's like, you know,
and this is what we've just
you're
tied
not
up
going to be
into
needed
a bow.
anymore.
And this is what we've just tied into a big bow about, some of the things we talked about today. It's exciting, yet kind of frightening all at once. The digital chip, the computer chip, which is allowing us to do a lot of amazing things, but it's with some trepidation. As we wrap it up, talk about, let's talk about the network and how you came up with the idea and how you're developing it and where it's going on a daily basis.
Well, what I can tell you is the Truth Be Told Radio Network is one of the leading Christian broadcasters in the country right now. We are very, very aggressive at using smart technology to broadcast. We want to go where the people are. We want to reach as many people as possible. One of the great ways to do that is to use smart tech. It's the direction that things are going in. As you saw me earlier before, just call up a local radio station. It'll start playing. The same thing can happen with this, with what I'm doing. So we have what's called a skill written for this. We have what's called an action written for these. And so all you do is, if you have either one, make sure with this one, you just say a word and you say enable Truth Be Told Radio Network. And then after that, you should be able to just say a word, play Truth Be Told Radio Network, and it will play. With this one, all you have to do is just say play Truth Be Told Radio Network, and it'll come in from TuneIn Radio, and you're good to go. So that's one thing that we're doing. We broadcast over any Wi-Fi radio in the world. We broadcast over the TuneIn. We broadcast over the MyTuner software. We broadcast phone numbers that you can dial in on your phone, put on the smartphone, or if you have a home phone with unlimited long distance speakerphone, dial it, you're listening. And we have hosts like Chris Pante. He's on Monday through Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, every day live. We have Sid Roth, who's been doing broadcasting for 40 years. We have John Kilpatrick. We have just a really big names in Christian broadcasting, and people who you might not know all that well, local to where they are, but are doing fantastic programs. And it's something, if you get the chance, check it out. You'll get some really great Christian-based programming without preaching at you and giving you the fire and brimstone treatment. Nobody likes that. So you'll get really great programming, and you can listen to it for hours. And what I notice is a lot of our listeners, I'll see it, they're listening for hours on end, Chris. It's pretty cool.
Just for fun, because we talk about this every once in a while, it must be incredibly gratifying for you that the idea went from here into a computer, and now you have countries, right? Is it over 30 countries have tuned in?
Yes, sir.
I mean, that must freak you out, right, bro?
Yeah, we get about 30 countries a week, a high of 35. I've seen a high, really 35. I've seen a low of about 25 a week. And, at any time, there's 5 or 6 or 7 countries that are listening at any time. Like your show is heard consistently all over the U.S., Canada. Okay, they're tuning in. Germany, France, and believe it or not, Russia. Russia listens all the time. It's always lit up. There's always somebody, and a lot of somebody's listening in Russia, believe it or not, which is kind of cool.
I just wonder how I come across in Russian.
Well, what I find interesting is because English is so common that you have a lot of countries. Germany listens all the time. And when I went to school in Scotland, I had some students there from Germany, and found out that it was taught as a second language from when they were little. So these guys spoke fluent English as well as German. So you have a lot of English speakers in Germany.
We got about 3.5 minutes left, Kev. Talk about when you could see Timeout, or where we could see Timeout with Kevin Gallagher, and also do a little promo on your interview about the birth of Christ, a great show that's coming up.
Sure. Let's see. Timeout with Kevin Gallagher, Friday nights, 8:30 p.m., Channel 23. It replays 11 a.m. on Monday mornings. We have the show, the audio of that replays on my radio network, 9 p.m. Friday nights. That's Eastern time. So that goes out worldwide. Also, you can go to timeoutyoutube.com, and you can see hundreds of shows. And I'm going to be doing, as I get off the air with you, I'm going to be taping a show in about a half an hour or so. We're doing actually a set of 3 shows that are going to feature the life and times of what was going on in Israel during the time of the birth of Christ. And I have this guy, Tim Kynes. He has been studying this time period and what was going on in Israel and the whole Middle East, for that matter, for about 35 years. And so some of the fascinating things that you think about, it says in the Bible that, we think of 3 wise men showing up and it caused a great uproar in the city. Well, if you really think about it, 3 guys showing up asking where the Messiah was born isn't going to cause an uproar. But if you have anywhere from around 6,000 troops that take 12 hours to walk into the city because Herod thought he was being invaded, yeah, that's going to cause an uproar. And these guys wouldn't travel alone at night through the Middle East on the Silk Road, 1 or 2 of them, they get killed. But you have an army traveling with you, nobody's going to mess with you. And these are the sort of things that we don't understand in their context when you see it in the actual events of what happened versus the mythology of what we've been taught about the 3 wise men, the sheep herders, this and that. It pales in when you look at the actual events that happened, 2,000 something years ago.
Well, we're looking forward to that, Kev. You know why? Because you have produced great shows. Great
Thank you.
shows, very insightful, with the accompanying facts and visualizations. And I want to thank you for the opportunity that you've given me, and continue to do great work, because you're necessary on the planet in 2021.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And folks, I wish I had 10 more hosts just like Chris. And tune into his show Monday through Fridays, 1 p.m. You can listen a whole bunch of different ways.
Kevin, thank you, brother. We will talk soon. That was Kevin Gallagher, CEO of the Truth Be Told Radio Network, taking care of 25 years, and we hope for 25 more. In the interim, I'm Pante. We will be back next week, same bat time, same bat station. And on November 10th, we're going to have 1986 World Series champion Ed Hearn to talk about that magical year in lieu of the 30-30 that just came out on ESPN about that team. So I know it's gloomy according to Fox and CNN and MSNBC, but the Spirit of God says we are about to turn the corner and life is going to be awesome and amazing. And we're not even going to remember the C word. We're not even going to remember the inflation and the gas prices. It's about to get really good because God's going to establish it. I'm Pante. Stay strong, stay prayerful, and I'll see you next week.